Hey everyone, welcome to Building Mental Resilience in the Face of Uncertainty. I had to read that off my phone because it's quite a quite a mouthful. My name is Matt Phelan. I'm co-founder, co-CEO and head of global happiness at Happiness Index, and I'm here with my guest,
Clive Hyland, who is the advisor on neuroscience to the Happiness Index, apart from the other coaching stuff that I do.
Clive and I are recording again because we recorded a webinar on the neuroscience of stress. It was very popular and had lots of questions. But the reason we've come back together again, there's a lot of demand, a lot of questions around uncertainty. And we talked a lot around how we're moving into the fourth month of lockdown now. And I just wanted to read out some of the questions that we're getting that are raising uncertainty, because we get a lot of HR directors, CEOs who are trying to manage uncertainty in their business. Questions like, how long will lockdown last? How will it impact the economy and my job and finances? How will employer create a safe workplace? When will it be safe to travel on public transport? Can I maintain the level of flexibility I had before? When can my kids go back to school? These are huge questions that people have at work and at home. And they're creating uncertainty. And Clive, just to recap on the last session, one of the real things, a lot of questions have come in on your point of how important it is to include emotion at work. You finished up on that, but just for those people that didn't listen to the last seminar, and also I want to apologise for the baseball cap, but I did my COVID cut and it looks so terrible.
Stick to business, Matt.
Just want to apologise for that, but just to bring us up to speed, for those that missed the last one, in a very succinct, short way, why do you believe emotions belong at work?
Because emotions are the sensations and chemistry that mobilize us. Okay, they're the things, the feelings that make us do something, and the essential fuel of human behavior. And any attempt to deny emotions misses huge opportunities, and causes problems, because our emotions are there. We don't choose them. They exist before there's any choice involved. The only question is, what do we do with them?
Yeah, thanks, Clive. So I've got sort of three big questions for you today. That's why I'm looking down again my phone. Which is...
I don't have a phone with the answers, Matt, though.
Well,
so how does this work, right? Okay, go for it, mate.
Yeah. What is mental resilience, and can it be learned, or is it inherent?
Okay, good question. I would minimize the genetic element. Yeah, we're all born with a predisposition towards being tougher, or let's call it weaker in certain circumstances. But our genetics are only a starting template for the way that we are. And our genes are turned on and off through life. So it's not as if we have some genetic fate to follow and there's no other option. So what is absolutely key in terms of resilience is the things that we learn, especially at a young age. So particularly in the first 3 years of life, our emotional template of our brain is created. And if we've been encouraged to feel safe, to be nurtured, to feel that the world can be trusted, then that's going to create a level of resilience for us. If we've been in a situation where the world is a scary place and we've learned that as an early age, we're going to be very threat orientated, and that's much more a make or break type scenario. So obviously it's a big subject, but the simplicity of it is to say it's much more about what we've learned in life, the way that we've been nurtured, and that'll give us our response mechanisms to the experiences that we face later in life.
This isn't a pre-planned question, but an observation, because for lots of people, children have gone back to school this week, including mine. Do you think that's linked to, one of my observations is that children have been much better at dealing with lockdown than parents. Do you think that's potentially why?
Yeah, I think children, it depends what age you're talking about. I guess you're talking about the younger children there, because it's not always the case with older children.
Your
Yeah,
primary school is probably, yeah, that's the range.
yeah. Well, I think they're more adaptable at that age, you know, and providing they feel emotionally secure, they're probably going to be able to cope with it. Okay. If you think, for instance, children only develop consciousness around about 6 years of age. Okay. So up until then, they're very much going with the flow. And then that process of thinking about life, you know, and internalizing our thoughts starts from around about that age. So
Wow.
through then those junior school ages, primary school, etc., that'll become more and more important. So very much down to the child, how safe they feel. But as they will always look to mum and dad, and if mum and dad look and make them feel like everything is okay, that's the way they'll tend to deal with life.
Right, that's why, because for the first 6 years of my daughter's life, she's been fine watching Star Wars, and I've been loving it.
Yeah.
And now she's suddenly scared of it, and I
And
feel
now
like,
she's saying, "What's he make me do?"
yeah, now I feel like a really bad dad.
Yeah.
Clive, through these webinars, we've created a lot of fellow, I'll call them neuroscience geeks, who we're
Okay.
really getting into the brain side of this.
Good.
One of the questions that people have been asking me is, because you helping people visualize the brain has helped people. So one of the questions people are asking is, what does resilience look like in the brain?
Okay, so there are various instruments that we can use. You know, people will have normally heard of like an ECG, which is electrocardiogram for the heart. The EEG is the version for the brain where we detect things like brain waves. So can we spot a resilient brain? Well, what we can do is spot a healthy brain, you know, because we can understand the difference between what's healthy and what doesn't. We can map things like the blood flow of the brain and make sure that everything seems to be in working order. Of course, you can't do that in isolation from things like behavior, because to a degree our behavior is the evidence as to whether our brain is working properly or not, right? So you have to look at both, but absolutely you can look through imaging technology now and get a decent sense of what a healthy brain looks like.
Okay, that's so useful, Clive. I just want to read out, because in our, a lot of people now, call it what we want, they're planning for return to work,
Yeah.
they're thinking about what their culture is. I just want to read out, because in our platform, there's millions and millions of anonymous comments. And we do quantitative and qualitative analysis using artificial intelligence. But sometimes one comment, just one tiny comment out of those millions sums up something.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to talk about how people can use this understanding of resilience to help build a thriving culture. Because as you know, with your work, one of the things that we've moved away from is high performance cultures. Not because high performance is bad, because it sometimes means different things to what it initially was set out to achieve. And this was a comment that we found. My team are overstretched, but as we are high achievers, we don't communicate this with leadership. Most people are working weekends to keep up, and I fear it's making us physically and mentally sick. I want to point out that this was happening before lockdown. So we're seeing in some companies where they believe that, and you see this, a lot of footballers talk about this, don't they? They say, if I talk about my mental health in the press, it may mean that I'm not in the team 6 weeks later because I can't be trusted. So have you got advice on how resilience and well-being can be built into a thriving culture?
Okay, so yeah, again, obviously a very big subject, but starting with those examples, what it seems to me is that, you know, taking examples like the professional footballers and the equivalents in the corporate world, is what you don't really have is a collective embracing culture in those organizations like you don't have in the team. So it's very much all about performance, which is I think the implication of what you said, but there's not balance with the well-being of the individuals concerned. Now the danger of that is that you're hiding the cracks. And when enforced change comes along, which is what happened, obviously, with the coronavirus, it means that any flaws become accentuated in the culture of organization. So people now, because they're forced into relative states of isolation anyway, they're having to cope with themselves. So that literally means that they're lacking the connection to work with others to cope with the new circumstances. So By forcing people into an individualistic type of environment where it's all about are you a good performer or not, it becomes very dangerous. You know, it's fine when things are going well, but when the pressure's on, the cracks will appear. And you can see that these people themselves, even though they acknowledge themselves as high performers, inadvertently what they're saying is we need other people. We need other people around us. And by the way, we all do. There is no top performer in any sport, in any profession, who doesn't need other people around them. And I don't mean just in a practical sense, I mean in an emotional sense. You know, whether it's trust and support, or whether it's just validation of who they are. So that's what we will find out. And part of the pressure of this environment is that it'll sort out the good organizations from the bad ones in the way that they are currently looking after their employees. And some businesses are going to have to come back and radically rethink about what they really got to build on. You know, those that are already trying to do the right things have got a platform in which to move forward in terms of the trust and culture of staff. But it's going to be really interesting to see how this shakes out.
Yeah. I just want to move on to practical advice, Clive.
Yeah.
And obviously, for anyone listening, they can use the Happiness Index completely free to find out how their people are feeling via employee voice. We've got wellbeing modules. We have return to work, which lots of companies are using. Now, I've been looking at the return to work data as it's flowing in, and we have hundreds of different customers using it. So what's really interesting looking at it is every company's response is different. I can see companies' employees saying, I want to get back in the office. I can see Slater and Gordon, which are a law firm, who've had data back in that says their teams don't want to go back, and they've actually made the decision to shut the office. So they're going to move to a distributed workforce, which is great. But I'm also seeing the opposite coming through from employees. So I would say they're the enlightened companies, the ones that are listening. But I speak to a lot of HR people that they see our technology, they go, that's great, I'd love to use that, and they get it. But they're working with leadership teams that are saying that this is what we're going to do before they've listened to their people. And they're saying to me, how do I get through to the CEO? The CEO's saying, I want everyone back in the office, but I know that people don't want to come back into the office. Have you got practical advice of how a HR director could get that message through to the CEO?
Well, yeah, I mean, clearly there's an education piece in this. You know, it's not going to be constructed in one conversation. And part of it does come back to this conversation about high performance and what that means, and how important things like trust are in high performance. Because if we don't trust our bosses and our environments, we cannot give of our best. So in a situation like this, you know, the ability to build trust is going to be fundamental. And one of the ways, in a practical sense, of building trust is collaboration. So the danger that I see in this situation is, once again, let's call them traditional organizations and traditional leaders, they have this sense that they have to have the answers themselves. And I don't think they do. They put themselves under too much pressure, and sometimes they're under that pressure from shareholders, you know, so the pressure goes up further even in the leaders. But the organizations of the future are going to be about how do we collaborate? How do we get everyone in the business to feel a sense of ownership of this business and its performance so that we do things together? You know, we cannot have a situation where the paradigm is all about hierarchy and control and the guys at the top expected to have all the answers, because they don't. In the past, that may have been just about feasible, but things move so fast now. The availability of information, technology, etc., everything is so fast that anyone who sits at the top and thinks they can stay in control is seriously mistaken. So now it's about embracing the speed of change and recognizing that by working with your people, you've got all the contactedness that you need, both with the people and the environment, to work out what the solution should be. You know, get them on board. It's not just your problem, it's their problem. That's the essence of the debate. And I know that's difficult, because if a CEO doesn't want to hear, you know, there's still going to be challenges. I get that. So you have to keep chipping away. And that's why things like measurement and science are important. Because, you know, I'm not knocking the guys at the top. It's what they've been asked to do in the past, right? But now they need something they can believe in for the future. And I think things like science and measurement and strong emotional arguments backed with those things can make a difference.
Yeah.
So let the past go, you know?
And going back to the subject of resilience, if a CEO is listening, I'm going to give you 2 sentences to answer this one.
Okay, cool.
Why should a CEO take the resilience of their employees important? Why should it be on their agenda?
Because without it, his or her leadership is not sustainable. You know, a good leader will know their platform is built by the people that are around them, yeah? And they will lose that platform. There's no ifs or buts about this. You know, people are going to change as a result of this experience and will not provide that platform for the leaders to be successful. So resilience is something, it's a challenge that everyone faces, you know, and again, you know, I try not to blame the guys at the top because they are in difficult jobs sometimes, but it really means that they themselves have resilience issues. And by trying to solve their problems on their own, that's not the answer either. Yeah. This is all about, I said in the previous conversation, look, people love to be part of a team or an organization that is thriving and successful. You know, it makes them feel good, it validates who they are. So if you use them in the right way, they will want to be a part of that resilience thinking that keeps them moving forward.
Yeah.
Sorry, it was more than 2 sentences.
It was 11 sentences you used.
Okay, sorry.
I wasn't counting. I think it was more than that. No, that's great, Clive. So we're just moving into wrap up now. One thing I've observed on wellbeing, resilience, return to work, and employee voice, as I've been looking through the happiness index data, is that, and I've been trying to look at the companies that have done it well and the ones that have not so. And one thing I've observed is the companies that are listening more and communicating back what they've heard are getting higher scores. Their employees are happier, their well-being's higher. It seems to be a cycle of it all working together. And interestingly, the ones that are doing it don't even realize they're doing it. It's become habit now. But the ones that are not sometimes say to me, oh, but that's a lot of work to do that. And I'm trying to get better at, and lots of HR professionals that we work with, trying to get better at to explain why it's actually less work to build this into habit. And I know you talk a lot about making things become instinctive, making it happen. And we had Slater and Gordon, I picked them out because they were on HR and your PJs yesterday. She almost couldn't answer the question on why it was working because it had just become habit. They've forgotten they're doing it. Have you got any thoughts on how you build listening and communicating into more of an instinctive way of doing it?
Yeah, you know, when it comes down, there are lots of grand conversations about personal and organizational change, but at the simplest level, that is about creating new habits. Okay, now that's not as easy as it sounds, but clearly there are examples where it happens. So when we look at bringing about fundamental change like that, I would say there are 3 levels that need to be considered. You know, at the top level, it's about providing meaning. You've heard me say this before, and meaning provides direction, something to believe in. Okay? The second level then is about relationships and trust. So once you've got trust, people want to engage. Yeah, it's a natural force within us to engage. So the meaning provides us with the direction, the vision, etc. Now the third layer that we're starting to touch on here is habits, is behaviors. And once you've got the inspiration to want to do something differently, to want to improve at something, you have to create daily routines. Now, they could be mental routines, they could be actually doing something in a particular way, and you have to work on something like roughly a fortnight in order to say, okay, that's going to start to now become natural, right? And I'm not talking about mantras or things like that, because most of the time they don't work. This is something that we actually do. And what we do by that is that we start to change our experience. And we start to see things work, and it comes back to us. And through that process, it becomes more natural. You know, sometimes we've got skepticism about the past. And let me pick up the comment about, oh, this is a lot of work. Of course it's a lot of work. But think about all the work that you are spending on fixing stuff that shouldn't have to be fixed. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the cost opportunity involved in doing things wrong from the top is huge. So what we're talking about here now, people are so used to spending their time on fixing this problem and fixing that problem. And it's a bit like the COVID situation. It's like, well, what happens if that changes? And suddenly you've got time in your hands. You know, if we could turn that negative fixing time into growing time, where we're learning to be better in ourselves and with each other and with the organization as a whole, then that would be hugely powerful. At the end of the day, an organization is a community. It's a community with a purpose, part of which is commercial. We can get people on board with that thinking, but you have to put the work into creating those day-to-day habits that start to turn the wheels of change.
Yeah.
And the rest comes with it, you know?
Yeah. Clive, I'm going to have to wrap up. I'm going to try and
Okay.
summarize what you said for everyone.
Okay,
The
2
biggest
sentences,
point,
Matt.
the biggest thing I've taken from today is that if you're a business leader, any level of your business, you need to be thinking about the long-term sustainability of that business. So all these things that we're talking about, happiness, human behavior, the brain, they come back to sustainability. So the reason you would want to take the subject of this talk really important is because it's your job to build a sustainable business, and resilience is a huge part of that. So Clive, as ever, I just want to say thank you.
Yes.
Adios.
Cheers, Matt.
Thank you.
Good luck with the next haircut.
Yeah, I'll try and make it better. Thanks,
You won't
Clive.
need it for a while. All the best. Bye.